All right. How is everybody doing today or tonight or whenever you might be watching this? I appreciate your willingness to let me uh, record this and send this to you. Tate, I'm just going to send this to him. It'll be on my YouTube channel, so he'll give you the link, and you can tune into that just whenever whenever you're ready. It is not a problem. And then the next Monday night we will be in full effect at Oak Hill. So let's see. We are. It's going to be a little bit more informal than it normally is. Let's go to chapter 31. Chapter 31, Genesis. This may not be as full 2 hours. Last time it was. I was surprised that we got all that in 2 hours, but we need to make up some time. So let's go ahead and get started. In this chapter, last chapter, Jacob calls Rachel and Leah, calls them to the field. He explains to them why they need to leave. He says, your father's doesn't look at me the same way they used to look at me. Your brothers are upset because everything that your dad has is now mine because I'm being blessed while he's not. And he says it's time to leave. So they decide that they're going to do this. In chapter 31, that's where we're looking at. In verse 4, so Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field where his flock was and said to them, I see that your father does not regard me as he did before. And they say, listen, we are essentially strangers in our father's house. He doesn't look at us the same way, even though it's kind of strange because they've got grandchildren. He has grandchildren through them, and for some reason he still takes great issue. And so they say, well, whatever the Lord says to do to you, that's what you need to do in verse 16. So here Jacob makes his plan. He gets up, he puts his sons and his wives on camels. He drives away all of his livestock. And what do you mean by driving away? It means he's driving them before him, all the shepherds that work for him, all of his servants. He sends everything that he owns personally, he sends ahead of him, and he remains behind. Couple of different reasons for this, probably because he knows that he's going back home. And at this point, it could be a little bit, I don't necessarily want to use the word cowardice, but it could very well be the idea of cowardice. He's going to send everything ahead of him, and he's going to remain behind, hopefully that if he's the last person to arrive, Esau will not be upset, because that's what he's really worried about. He's not worried about Isaac. He's not worried about Rebekah. He's worried about Esau. What is Esau going to do? So he drives away all of his livestock. In verse 19, Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel stole her father's household gods. This is kind of an interesting thing because we understand Laban to be a believer in the true God, and that is certainly, I believe, to the case. His understanding of the law, his understanding of the of certain things that God expects. I believe that he is a follower of Jehovah God. However, that did not prevent people from that time from bringing in certain household gods. It's interesting that it's presented this way. The idea of household gods, not the idea of a god that you would go out and give sacrifice to. These were the little gods. They were typically personified by little small figurines, and it could be an animal, it could be an image of a person, it could be all kinds of things, but they would keep inside of their house, and it was more of we would probably even refer to as almost like a lucky charm, like a rabbit's foot. They weren't worshipped, but they were certainly looked to as possibly having some sway over the everyday lives of the people that observed them. Okay, so she steals her father's household gods, the little figurines that correspond to these household gods. So Jacob tricked Laban the Aramean by not telling him that he intended to flee, and we talked about that. What would the norm be? What would the norm be? The norm would be that he would say, it's time for me to leave. It's time for me to go back home. I came here many years ago, and you've blessed me. I thank you for your hospitality. Thank you for family. And what would happen, and we see in just a couple of moments where Laban even says, why didn't you tell me that you were leaving? I could have done this and this. So they would have certainly thrown a big feast. It probably would have taken several days. They would have had people from all over the place, a big, big send-off. But he tricks him by by not telling him he's going to leave, so he could kind of make a hasty getaway. Why was this the case? Well, we'll see in chapter 31. I tell you what, let's go ahead and read a little bit further down. Then we'll get into chapter a little bit further on. Verse 22. It was told Laban on the third day that Jacob had fled, took his kinsmen and pursued him for 7 days and followed closely after him into the hill country of Gilead. But God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream by night and said to him, verse 24, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. That's interesting. Why would he say not to say anything good or bad? Probably to watch his tongue, because he doesn't know what's up. He doesn't know what's going on. God is with Jacob. God has something in mind. And the thing for Laban is to just keep your peace. And when it says good or bad, it does not mean he can't say something nice to him when he sees him. And we see in just a couple of moments, Laban kind of lays into Jacob, and understandably so. But then again, Jacob has his opportunity. So Laban overtakes Jacob, and this is understandable. You got lots of animals; they have to be pastured. You can't drive them for days. You could drive a herd of sheep. You could drive them for a certain part of the day, and then you have to stop and you let them rest. And then you pack up and you do it again, and then you stop and you let them rest. Plus, you've got women and children, you've got servants, you've got all these people that are coming along with him. So it was fairly easy for Laban with just his men to catch up to Jacob. All right. So in verse 26, he catches up to him, and Laban says to Jacob, "What have you done, that you have tricked me and driven away my daughters like captives of the sword?" Well, God just said, don't say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. And Laban's kind of letting him have it. And he has a point. He has a point. Why would you do that? Why would you not give him an opportunity to say goodbye to his grandchildren and his daughters and make a big deal? Look, he said, why did you flee secretly and trick me and not tell me, so that I may send you away with mirth and songs, with tambourine and lyre? Make a big deal out of this. And why did you not permit me to kiss my sons and my daughters? And the idea of sons and daughters, certainly his daughters, but he's talking about here the idea of his grandsons. And that would be common nomenclature back then. A son would be a grandson or great-grandson. It would still be considered a son of the patriarch. And now you've gone away because you longed greatly for your father's house. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Go back up. I apologize. Last part, 28. Now you have done foolishly. It is in my power to do you harm. But the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. And now you have gone away because you longed greatly for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods? Ooh. All right, so Jacob understands, or Laban understands, that his household gods are gone. So now what he's saying, look, you've done all these things, but you've stolen from me, like in a literal sense of stealing. He took it with him. I don't know why Laban thought that Jacob would have done this. It's kind of an unusual thing, but who else? Why would they have been there than not been there, and the people have fled? Maybe that's what he's thinking. They're fleeing because they stole the gods. Why Jacob would have wanted the gods of Laban, we're not really given to understand. It could be a jealousy type of thing. I don't know. And the Bible really doesn't tell us much about it. It just simply says he was upset. Of course, his household gods were stolen. He said, Jacob answers and said to Laban, because I was afraid, for I thought that you would take your daughters from me by force. Anyone with whom you find your gods shall not live. Now, this is, I think Jacob may be speaking out of turn. He doesn't know who's taken these. And it reminds me of several rash oaths that were taken by folks in that day and time. It could be a simple, I know no one took it, so I can make this outrageous claim that if anybody took your gods, they're going to die. That means who? Rachel. His own daughter would be killed for taking these household gods. He said, anyone with whom you find your gods shall not live. In the presence of our kinsmen, point out what I have that is yours and take it. It says Jacob didn't know that Rachel had stolen them. All right. So here's the question. Did Jacob need to leave? We'll get to the slide. Did Jacob need to flee? Could he have done what Laban said? Yes, he could have. The idea that he would have taken his daughters back by force would have been unthinkable. And I don't believe that Laban would have done anything like that, as angry as he was, as upset as he was. I don't think that Laban would have tried to take his daughters back by force, or his grandchildren. I think this is just Jacob giving reasons, whether good or bad, excuses as to why he fled. I know he did fear Laban to a certain extent, but likely that Laban would never have done anything like that. But is this possibly a lapse in faith? Maybe. It could be a little bit. God said, I'm gonna bring you back to this land. Remember when he came to him in a dream? He says, I'm going to bring you back to this land. And here's Jacob thinking that he's doing the right thing by running in the middle of the night, and how many problems could have been avoided had he simply said, look, it's time for me to go back home. God is calling me back home. I'm going to go back home. God never gave him the impression that he was going to have to save him from Laban, and I think that God would have certainly said that, but he didn't. So I think you could look at this maybe a lapse in Jacob's faith. So Jacob makes this very rash vow, and look at what happens with Rachel. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. All right. This is apparently, I think, a concern with Laban's character. So he goes into Jacob's tent, into Leah's tent, into the tent of the two female servants, but he did not find them. So he went out of Leah's tent and entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the gods and put them in the camel's saddle and sat on them. So she had taken the saddle off the camel. It was sitting in her tent, and she sat on the camel. Laban felt all about the tent, but did not find them. And she said to her father, let not my Lord be angry that I cannot rise before you, for the way of women, which means she's talking about her menstrual cycle. The way of women is upon me. And that would have been the case. To touch her would have been, for the people of the time, would have made them unclean. Now, this is not, we don't find this in the same way that we do in Levitical law, but that certainly was the case at the time. It was a sort of an unclean situation. So she was able to keep sitting on top of that saddle, kept the gods safe in her mind, and of course Laban was unable to find them. So now he's out these gods, doesn't know where they are. But so Jacob sees Laban can't find these gods. As far as he knows in his mind, they're not there. We didn't take them. We don't know where they are, and you have no right to be angry. Look at what happens. Jacob becomes angry and berated Laban. So as Laban had an opportunity to lay one on top of Jacob, Jacob lays it on Laban. What is my offense? Now, here's a chance. He's going, as I write here, Jacob lets Laban have it both barrels. He's put up with a lot over the past several years, and he's going to let Laban know exactly how he feels. What is my offense? What is my sin that you have hotly pursued me? For you have felt through all my goods. What have you found of all your household goods? Set it here before my kinsmen and your kinsmen, that they may decide between us two. These 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried, and I have not eaten the rams of your flocks. What was torn by wild beasts I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it myself. From my hand you required it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. There I was by day, the heat consumed me, and the cold by night, and my sleep fled from my eyes. In other words, you worked me like a hired hand, not like a valuable treasured member of your family. These 20 years I have been in your house. I served you 14 years for your $2 and 6 years for your flock, and you have changed my wages 10 times. So this gets us an idea about how long he's actually been there. So we have 14 years for the $2 and then 6 years for the flock. That's 20 years that Jacob has been in the house of Laban, serving him as a shepherd of his flocks. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been on my side, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God saw my affliction and the labor of my hands and rebuked you last night. Okay, so each of them has had an opportunity to kind of air out these grievances that apparently have been bubbling over for a number of years. You wonder how long Jacob was angry with Laban for tricking him, deceiving him on his wedding night, and this has been piling up. And then, it says here, he said, you have changed my wages 10 times. We don't read about that earlier in the narrative, but here it's something he's bringing it up, and Laban has to sit there and listen to it. So Laban answers and says to Jacob, the daughters are my daughters, the children are my children, the flocks are my flocks, and all that you see is mine. But what can I do this day for these my daughters, or for their children whom they have borne? Come now, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me. All right. So Laban kind of has to accept the fact that they're leaving. There's nothing he can do about it. And as he made the conditions of the covenant between the two of them in regards to the flocks, he has to abide by it. Doesn't matter how it happened. He has to abide by it. So he's like, okay, well, let's do this. And I want you to look at this covenant, though, because this is kind of important. The idea, they set up these rocks as a pillar, and they take the stone and make a heap, and they give it, Laban gives it one name, which was probably Aramaic. Jacob gives it another, which is Hebrew. Laban says, this heap is a witness between you and me today. And look at verse 49, and we see this kind of often. You see these necklaces that let the Lord watch between you and me while we're away from one another. You see those little necklaces, and one will be on one side and one will be on the other, and you'll give it to somebody that you care for. I've seen two girls, like, this is our friendship necklace, and or boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever it is. Look at what it says. The Lord watch between you and me when we are out of one another's sight. Now we look at it and we think, oh, that's, this is not, there's no love lost between Jacob and Laban. This is not a situation of, hey, I care for you, you care for me, and let the Lord keep an eye on us and make sure that we're okay. That's not what this is saying at all. He says, may the Lord watch between you and me when we are out of one another's sight. If you oppress my daughters, or if you take wives besides my daughters, although no one is with us, see, God is witness between you and me. In other words, if you treat my daughters badly, God sees, God is a witness. And I think he's thinking that he will come and make things right. Well, he doesn't have to worry about that. Jacob has no intention of doing that. But this is not a loving type of covenant. This is a covenant of, you watch what you do. All right, these are my daughters and these are my grandchildren. You better treat them well. So Laban says to Jacob in verse 51, this heap is a witness and the pillar is a witness, the rocks. I will not pass over this heap to you, and you will not pass over this heap and this pillar to do harm. All right. So this is, you stay on your side of the world, I'll stay on my side of the world. If you cross over, it better not be with the intention of doing harm, coming at me with the intent of doing damage. All right. The God of Abraham and the God of Nahor judge between us. So Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. This is speaking of Jehovah God. So Jacob offers a sacrifice in the hill country, calls his kinsmen to eat bread. That means Laban and everyone that came with him. They're going to come. And that was, while it was certainly a meal, it was a shared meal. It was in view of establishing this covenant. All right, it was kind of like we're going to have a final meal together. It settles this thing between the two of us. You're going to go your way, I'm going to go mine, and we will never see each other ever again. So they ate bread and spent the night in the hill country. Early in the morning, Laban arose, kissed his grandchildren and his daughters, and blessed them. Sorry, I had a couple of things. All right. Kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. Then Laban departed and returned home. All right. I'm sorry, this is supposed to be the slides up there. It gives us all the answers, gives us everything that we're going to do. Oh, and this is one thing. He might, it's possible that Laban wanted to have another chance to try and cheat Jacob one more time. Maybe, listen, if you'll come back, I'll do this, or if we do this, and he's looking for an opportunity to maybe get back some of what he had, or maybe convince him to leave some of maybe the handmaidens and their children, let them stay there. I don't know. But it's possible. It's possible he just simply wanted an opportunity to cheat Jacob one last time. All right. Let's see. Let's go to our next chapter. Jacob goes on his way, and the angels of God met him. So Jacob sees these angels, and these are not angels in the form of men. These are heavenly angels. And when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's camp," and he called the name of it Mahanaim. Or Mahanaim. Now we'll look at why he calls it this. All right, that word means two camps. So Jacob sends messengers before him to Esau in the land of Seir, the land of Edom. Makes sense, right? The Edomites, Esau. Instructing them, "You shall say thus to my lord Esau," and he gives him this speech that they're supposed to deliver to Esau. He's kind of tilling the field. He's trying to soften things up before he gets there. The last thing he wants to do is show up with all of these servants, all of these flocks, these women with their children and everything, and maybe try to, in Esau's eyes, maybe try to establish himself as being in control. And that's not what he says. He says, "I am going with you. I want you to send all of these." He's going to send animals as a peace offering. He's going to do all of these things. He wants them to know, hey, I'm on my way back home. I come in peace. I don't want any problems between the two of us. He says, "I have oxen, donkeys, flocks, male servants, female servants. I've sent to order that I may find favor in your sight." So I don't know necessarily that Jacob was in his nature a vindictive person. We see where he had little concern for the plight of someone because of the things he did to Esau. But we don't see where he was necessarily a vindictive, hard-hearted person. But the 20 years in Laban's house has definitely softened him up somewhat. And he wants to make peace with Esau. He doesn't want trouble with Esau. You might even say that he loves his brother and wants to reestablish the connection, this relationship between them. Okay, so Jacob gets word back. He makes these overtures towards Esau. He gets word back that Esau is coming your way. Look at what he says in verse 6. He's coming to meet you, and there are 400 men with him. Well, we tried, I guess, what Jacob's thinking is like, well, I tried, but there's nothing that we can do. We've set out on this journey. We can't stop. The best thing I could do is maybe try to manage the situation the very best that I possibly can. So he says he was greatly afraid and distressed. He divided the people into two camps. Mahanaim, okay, the word that he used earlier, two angels, two camps. He's going to split up the group into two different people, two camps, okay? So he says if Esau comes to one camp and attacks it, maybe the camp that's left will be able to escape and get on their way. Now, these were not camps. They couldn't be very close to one another. They had to be fairly far separated. And I think we don't get a really good glimpse of how vast the land is, number one, and how large a contingency is returning with Jacob. All right. This is the idea, a large company. That's what Isaac says when he sent him on his way, that the Lord would bring him back in a large company, and that's what Jacob ends up coming back to Isaac with, is a large company. So Jacob says, O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, return to your country. And look at Jacob really humbles himself, right? He humbles himself. I'm not worthy of the least of all the deeds of steadfast love and faithfulness that you have shown to your servant. For with only my staff I crossed this Jordan. Now I become two camps. Please deliver me from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, that he may come and attack me, the mothers with the children. This shows that he understands that his brother was angry, and it's possible that his anger is far more heated, let's just say. It's far more heated than it actually is. He's worried. He's scared. The idea that his brother would come, he says, I guess he's thinking that, well, if he would kill me, then he would kill my wife and children. And that is not typically the case. I think the worst case scenario would be that he would come, kill Jacob, and maybe take the women and the children for himself with all of his stuff. It's the only thing that I can think of. That's probably the worst case scenario. But, of course, Jacob didn't need to worry about that at all, and we'll get on to that. So he says, but you said, I will surely do you good and make your offspring as the sand of the sea. Well, he's already seeing the beginnings of this with his 12 children so far. We got 12 so far. And we're going to have 13 before too long. As the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. Okay, so he's gone to God. He's gone to God in prayer. He asks him to preserve him from the hand of his brother Esau, whatever form that might take. Even if he has to humiliate himself and humble himself before his brother Esau, he says, I just don't want anybody to die. Please save me, save the women, save the children, so forth and so on. All right. So he stayed there that night, and from what he had with him, he took a present for his brother Esau. Now this is no small present. Look at what he offers up: 200 female goats and 20 male goats. So a breeding herd of goats. All right. 200 ewes and 20 rams. A breeding flock of sheep. 30 milking camels and their calves. All right, so a camel was an expensive animal. So he gives them 30 milking camels and their calves. So we're talking probably 60 camels total. 40 cows and 10 bulls, another breeding herd. 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys, another breeding herd. So I don't know if he's thinking that Esau is bereft of goods, but he's making sure that whatever he sends him would be able to maybe stave off any anger that Esau might still have. So he hands them over to his servants, every drove by itself, and he says, pass on ahead of me and put a space between drove and drove. In other words, the sheep will go first, or the goats will go first. then the sheep will go, and then the camels will go, and then the cattle will go, and then the donkeys will go, and they're going to go in these little waves. Okay, so one's going to go far ahead, and the other one's going to go, and then the other one's going to go, and the other one's going to go, and each one of them is going to have a not just one. He's probably going to have 2 or 3 herdsmen for this group of animals, and they're going to go ahead. And he says, instructed the first, when Esau my brother meets you and asks you, to whom do you belong? Where are you going, and whose are these ahead of you? You shall say, they belong to your servant Jacob. They are a present to my lord Esau. Moreover, he is behind us. So every single one of them is going to say the same thing. These are for you. My master's coming behind me. And then he'd meet up with the other one, and they would say the same thing. So there would be these waves of presents for Esau, and then of course it would get to the servants, the other servants, the wives, the children, and then Jacob will come behind. Now, that's how it starts. We'll see where it changes here in just a couple of moments. So he's going to say that verse 20, moreover, your servant Jacob is behind us, for he thought, I will appease him, maybe appease him with a present that goes on ahead of me. And afterward I shall see his face, perhaps he will accept me. So the very real fear for Jacob is that his brother Esau will reject the presents and still seek to do him harm. And it's an understandable fear. Even though it's been 20 years, some wounds don't heal that quickly. I mean, if you think about what he did, took his birthright and then took his blessing, he understands that Esau may still really have a problem with him, and I can understand that. But I think honestly, the end of this is probably one of the things, and it's such a small part of the narrative, just a couple of verses, but it's honestly one of the best feelings that I get when I read the scriptures is what happens between these two. All right. So what he's going to do is he's not only is he going to go give him all of these things, his gift is going to show his wealth. This is what the Lord has blessed me with. So he's hoping that his actions might appeal to the mercy of Esau. All right. So let's look at this in verse 22. And we're not going to go too much into this. A lot has been made of it. And a lot of it is conjecture, and it's wrong. It's incorrect conjecture. Some of it is correct, and some of it we just don't understand. Why this happened, we're not real sure. But let's read it. In verse 22, the same night he arose and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 children, crossed the ford of the Jabbok, took them and sent them across the stream and everything else that he had. So he's putting distance between himself and his family. Why? We don't know. Again, I'm not sure the word cowardice is the right word. A pervasive sense of fear could potentially be that. It could be that he saw these angels. Remember when we first came into the chapter, he saw these angels. He may be thinking that there's something that's going to happen between them and him, and he needs to be alone for that. Maybe he's going to talk to God, but it says that Jacob was left alone. And it's very interesting the way this reads. There's no buildup to it. There's no easing into the situation. It says, and Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. I mean, it's kind of a... You don't want to give us any kind of background to this? You don't want to explain anything more? No, here it is. And a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. And when the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, in other words, he wasn't winning this wrestling match, and the wrestling match is not indicative of anything other than they were wrestling with one another. They were grabbing each other and trying to make, one was trying to make the other one submit. Same thing as you find in a wrestling match. This verse has been twisted every way in the world. Wrestling means this, and the man is this, and the breaking of the day is not really that. It's this. He's not going to stop until Jacob, the breaking of the day. In other words, he sees the light. That's not what it's saying. It means what it says. It says there's a man that wrestled with him until the breaking of the day, until the morning light starts to creep over, and he can see. He's wrestling with him until that point. And when the man that he's wrestling with saw that he was not winning, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. The idea of touched here, some people believe that it was simply a miraculous touch. He was able to touch him and disable him. If that's the case, then why didn't he do that the entire night he was wrestling with Jacob? Was this a non-going thing? I'll go and tell you, I did a little bit of that when I was in junior high. And let me tell you, if a wrestling match goes much over 5 minutes, you're worn out. So I don't believe this was a sense of they constantly wrestle with one another. Their physical stamina just wouldn't allow it. It's possible, and again, this is conjecture, but I'm not presenting it as absolute. It's conjecture that they wrestled with one another and then they talked. Then they wrestled with one another and they talked, and there was this conversation that happened over the course of the evening. I don't know, and neither does anyone else. I'm simply giving some ideas about that would explain why this reads the way that it reads. The idea of touching his hip socket, I'm of the opinion this was simply a matter of just touching it with his finger. I think this is a matter of when he touched it, he hit it in such a way that his hip socket was put out of joint. In other words, I don't use the word cheated, but if you're thinking about who we're thinking about, what kind of lesson would that be? Hey, everything was going well until you cheated, and then the person that you were striving with lost the battle. I don't know. Again, I simply don't know. One thing I do believe, I believe 100%, is this is God in human form. I believe this angel is God in human form. All right, because we'll see here in just a couple of moments. I believe that when God is in human form, he is a pre-incarnate Christ. Not Jesus, not Emmanuel. I'm talking about the Christ in human form. All right, not born of man, not born of woman, not coming from a man and a woman, but sent, assuming human form to do certain things. We see the same thing when Joshua is about to go to battle, and what happens? He sees this man with a sword, and he asks, "Are you for us or for our enemies?" And he says, "I'm here on behalf of God." And I believe that is a pre-incarnate Christ. It is not Jesus the Christ. It is the Christ. Okay? In human form, of course, he has the strength of man. And you think about Jesus. Jesus didn't. We're not aware that Jesus had any more strength as a man than any other man. Okay? The only thing he had was miraculous powers, but he doesn't use those to wrestle with Jacob at this particular point in time. He uses his human powers. I think maybe showing what, I'll tell you what, let's go, because I think some of our answers are right below this. He says, let me go for the man that he's wrestling with says, let me go for the day is broken. But Jacob said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. So Jacob, I think, has an inkling about, an understanding about who this might be. This is not some normal man. This is a man that has unique characteristics. He said to him, what is your name? And Jacob says, Jacob. And he said, then your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel. And here's where we get a little bit of a view into this. He says, for you have striven with God and man and have prevailed. And Jacob asked him, please tell me your name. But he said, so why is it that you ask my name? And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, saying, for I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered. Now, we see nowhere where this is contradicted in any way, shape, or form. So Jacob understood that the person that he was wrestling with, the person he had this encounter with, this interaction with, is not a normal person. It is not a man born of man and woman that walked this earth. He's not like anybody else. He says, I have seen God face to face. Well, when we see the face of Jesus, we see God in human form. We do see the face of God, not in his true glory. And some have said that this is why this happened at night, not in the middle of the day. When the sun came up, Jacob would be able to see the face of God in its glory, and he was spared because it was time for this man to go. Again, lots and lots of conjecture, all right? And I don't know if we'll ever know exactly 100% what's going on here, but I think it's pretty evident that this person, this man, was God in human form. He was a pre-incarnate Christ. He had the ability to bless Jacob, and certainly had the right and the ability to change his name. So this is what he does. He says, you shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel. And Israel means he strives with God. Now, there's two ways to look at that, right? In this case, what is he doing? He's wrestling with God, all right, in pursuit of a blessing. But we can also look at this as he strives with God. In other words, he walks with God. striving against the world with God. Okay, so there's two ways of looking at that name, and both of them would be perfectly accurate in regards to Jacob. All right, so now his name is Israel. You'll notice that as it goes a little bit further on, it still refers to him as Jacob through the narrative, almost all the way through. But for a short period of time, when you see the word Israel, it's not talking about the nation of Israel. It's talking about the man Israel. And then, of course, later on, the nation of Israel. Much in the same way you saw the Ishmaelites. Okay, it was a man, and then now it's a nation, like Ishmael and the Ishmaelites. Okay, you have Esau and the Edomites. Okay, so there's a nation that arose from this man. Later on, they'll be known as Israelites. Okay, so he changes his name from Jacob, which means supplanter or deceiver, and now he changes this to Israel, as we said, strives with God. Why do you ask my name? I think this is because Jacob knows who he is. You know, you don't have to ask my name. You know who this is. I've spoken with you on numerous occasions. All right, I'm the God that spoke to you when you were on your way over. When you were on your way up. Sorry, that was my cousin. I apologize. Wasn't expecting that. All right. So this is where we are. And you'll notice in verse 32, the people of Israel don't eat the sinew of the thigh that's on the hip socket. Conservative or Orthodox Jews still will not eat that piece of meat. They still observe that. All right. Okay. That's chapter 32. Let's go to chapter 33. Jacob lifts up his eyes, and behold, Esau was coming. Now, if Jacob was scared of Esau before, I don't believe that he's scared of Esau anymore. Because look what happens. Esau's coming, and as was told, he has 400 men with him, so he divides the children among Leah and Rachel and the two female servants. He puts the servants with their children in front, and then Leah with her children, and Rachel and Joseph last of all. But look, instead of being at the end of the line, what does he do? He goes on before them. Before it was like, well, if I send the women and the children, maybe he'll have mercy, maybe his heart will be softened. At this point, he knows what he needs to do as the leader of this great nation that's coming from his loins. He knows what he needs to do. He needs to be a real leader. Okay, so what does he do? He gets out in front of the group. So you've got him, you've got the two female servants with their children, you've got Leah and her children, and then you've got Rachel with Joseph at the very back. But he's leading the charge. The animals and everything are already there. So he goes on before them. What does he do? He bows himself to the ground 7 times. I think this is the idea that as a mature, rational, wiser man from the night before, as a wise man, he is going to do what he needs to do, even if his brother will not. So he goes, and I think this is the idea that he's walking, and then he bows. And then he walks, and then he bows. And then he walks, and then he bows. He does this 7 times until he comes near to his brother. And again, this is probably one of my favorite parts of the Genesis narrative. Look what happens. These two brothers that were separated by anger and hatred. Esau was ready to kill his brother, and his brother really didn't seem to care that much about it. He was willing to cheat him one more time. Esau runs to meet him and embraces him and falls on his neck and kisses him, and they wept. I can't think of a more beautiful way for this to resolve itself. This was not, it could have been simply Esau said, you may come into the land, you may come back into the land, but I don't want to see you. I don't want to talk to you. If you're at our parents' place, I don't want to be there when you are. You let me know when you leave, and then I'll go see them if necessary. If they pass, then you'll be the one responsible for them. I do not want to see you. Esau doesn't do this. He has 400 men. He had every right to destroy Jacob, but he doesn't. Number one, God's watching out for him. Another, I think that this shows that Esau has put what happened in the past, and since God has blessed him, he no longer has the anger and the bitterness. But I love this. He runs to meet him. He doesn't make him come and grovel. He runs and meets him, hugs him, kisses him. You can imagine these two brothers kissing each other on the face. The whole cheek thing that's customary to the region. Esau lifts up his eyes. He sees the women and the children, and he says, "Who are these with you?" Jacob said, the children whom God has graciously given your servant. And look how Jacob refers to himself. I'm your servant. I'm your servant. The servants drew near and their children and bowed down. Leah likewise, and then Joseph and Rachel, and they bowed down. Esau said, what do you mean by all this company that I met? Jacob answered, to find favor in the sight of my Lord. So as these animals, as he's driven, remember the servants are driving on these cattle and the sheep and the goats and the camels. He says, what was all this? What was this supposed to be? He says, this is if I found favor in my sight, accept the present from my hand. And Esau says, I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself. He said, no, if I found favor in your sight, then accept my present from my hand. For I have seen your face, which is like seeing the face of God. Now, remember, these are twin brothers. It's not like one that's seriously older than the other. These guys came out of the womb together. Then you have to at least assume that during the first part of their lives, they at least got together. Maybe during adolescence, a little bit later, they started to drift apart. But these are kids that grew up together. They were brothers. He says, it's like seeing the face of God and you've accepted me. In other words, everything that all these past 20 years have been leading up to this point, and that is the reconciliation of me and you. He says, please accept my blessing because God has dealt graciously with me and because I have enough. Thus he urged him and Esau accepted it. I think we talked, I don't know if we discussed this when we discussed hospitality. One of the things of hospitality is it was expected that you would always bring a present. And what would happen is there's this intricate little dance that you would do. You would offer it, and the recipient would say, "Oh no, I can't." You said, "No, I insist that you receive it." "Oh no, but I can't." And then there would be a third time, "No, but I insist." And it was like, "Oh, okay." And it was like a customary thing. And of course, Esau they both abide by that time-honored tradition, and Esau receives the blessings. Look what happens. Verse 12, then Esau says, let us journey on our way, and I will go ahead of you. Jacob says to him, the children are small, and I can't drive these animals that long. Go ahead. You go on, and we will come slowly because you've got 400 men in you. You guys can move and go quickly. We're going to take some time. It's going to take us a while to get where we're going. Just let us do this. And Esau said, well, then let me leave some of the people that are with me with you. And I assume probably to help out, maybe to assist, help the people move a little quicker, whatever it may be. He's got all of these men that may be able to be a help. I don't see anything behind this at all. Any kind of mischief going on here. I think that Esau is genuinely wanting to help out his brother. He says, what need is there? Let me find favor in the sight of my Lord. So Esau listens and says, okay, all right, well, you follow along. Essentially, I look forward to seeing you again. And he and his men go back to Seir. But Jacob journeys to Succoth and builds himself a house and made booths for his livestock. The idea of booth is simply a pen. The booths for the Israelites were tents. They would dwell outdoors. So he builds these pens for all of his creatures, and he builds a house for himself, and the whole tribe essentially just sort of lives there for a period of time. And Jacob comes to Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan. So he's back in the land of Canaan on his way back from Padan Aram, and he camps in front of the city of Shechem. And from the sons of Hamor, Shechem's father, so Shechem is a man, Hamor is his father, he buys for 100 pieces of money the piece of land on which he had pitched his tent. So now he owns property. Not only do they own the cave of Machpelah where they're burying all of the patriarchs, they also own this piece of land now in front of Shechem. And he builds an altar, but like his father and his grandfather before him, he puts together an altar, and he calls it El Elohe Israel, which means God, the God of Israel. Okay? So I want to go back real quick. This is something on the slide. As Jacob is showing this humility coming to Esau, Esau isn't having any of it. So there's no reason for all that. He goes and he throws himself on his neck and he hugs him and kisses him. I liken the idea of the prodigal son, of course, that we find in Matthew chapter 5, verse 24. What happens? The prodigal son's been away. And the idea of prodigal, a lot of people think prodigal just means the son that's been out there. Prodigal means wasteful. What happened was that he went and he wasted the inheritance that came to him. Well, we don't find that here. Jacob didn't waste his inheritance. And as a matter of fact, he didn't have an inheritance until he got it from Laban. There was nothing there for him. So he goes and he gets this these blessings from God, and he comes back. And look what Esau does. He does not force him to grovel, which would have been perfectly within his right to do so. Doesn't force him to grovel. He runs, he hugs him and kisses him, much like the father did for that prodigal son. He sees him afar off. He runs to meet him. He doesn't make him come back. Tell you what, I'm going to stand right here. You get on your hands and knees and you come back and you kiss my foot and I want you to prove to me that you're sorrowful. He doesn't do that. And I think this is an incredible lesson to the Christian. When someone has sinned against us, even as egregiously as Jacob sinned against Esau, and he certainly sinned against Esau. He sinned against his father. He sinned against God. He did these terrible things. What does Esau do? He doesn't make him grovel. He restores him because Jacob showed humility and repentance for the things that he had done to him. And I probably the prodigal son may be one of my favorite parables, because all of the lessons that are contained in it, and that's certainly one of them. I don't know how many of you have probably been praying about a brother or sister, maybe even a member of the congregation, maybe even a member of your own family. Been praying about it, and finally that person makes the move to be restored. And I don't know how many times have you wept in the pew because some errant brother or sister comes before the congregation, apologizing to the congregation, confessing the sin before God, and the congregation is able to pray and restore them. And it's just, I don't know, it's such an incredible feeling. Well, I mean, what does the scripture say? It says that the angels in heaven rejoice. I mean, what does that tell you? It doesn't, they may rejoice over other things, but nothing else do they talk about rejoicing, angels rejoicing, except when a sinner is restored. So, I mean, that tells us that even they rejoice. If they can rejoice, we certainly can. Okay. All right, let's continue on. That's chapter 34. This is one of those stories that, honestly, I get a lot of pushback from a lot of people that are non-Christians or not believers. And they point out, I said, listen, one of the things about the scriptures is that the Lord has no problem telling us when his people do terrible things. All right, he doesn't shy away from it. In fact, we probably read more about God's people doing horrible things than even the people that surrounded them doing the horrible things. It talks in very great detail about the sins of the Israelites, but it doesn't really go into a whole lot of detail about the sins of the Canaanites, all right, the people that they displaced. Which goes to show that God wants us to know these things, and there's something to that. He wants us to learn from these things and be able to learn, do better, so to speak. All right, so here we go. Dinah, daughter of Leah, whom she had born to Jacob, the only recorded daughter. That means she's the only daughter. It means she's the only recorded daughter that we have of Jacob. Goes out to see the women of the land. Now, this concept is maybe this was some sort of a festival. These happened all the time. Harvest festivals. A lot of times they were festivals that were exclusively for women. They were able to get out and played music, and they were able to interact with one another. And it was just a chance for women to get together and, act like women with each other. Just, kind of do their whole, kind of like what we would consider to be a ladies' day. I'm not saying that's what it is, but that's possibly what this was. She goes out to see the women of the land. And the second part of this, it could be that she was very curious about the customs of the place that she's never lived before. Remember, this Canaan's new to them. So it could be that I'm going to go and find out, I've heard all of these things. I want to kind of go and see what's going on. All right. Kind of like college kids at spring break. I heard that this, and I'm going to go find out if this is true. Anyway, don't know. That's conjecture. But anyway, she goes out to visit or to see the women of the land. Now in Shechem, which is the city where Jacob has pitched his tent, says before, which means on the outskirts of Shechem. When Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, the prince of the land, saw her, he seized her and lay with her and humiliated her. Now, the word here is lakach, or lakwach. This means that irresistible force was used. Now, there's two ways that you can look at this, maybe more. This could mean physical force. In other words, he saw her, he desired her, he grabbed her, he seized her physically by the arm, he pulled her into his home or wherever it was, and he forcibly raped her. And that could certainly be the case that we're talking about here. It could also mean that she was coerced by his social status. In other words, he used his place as a prince to make her feel that she had no other option. Either way, if this irresistible force included making her do something that she did not want to do, it's absolutely and 100% reprehensible. It is despicable behavior. There are some who have sought to go back and retroactively say that this was not, he didn't actually seize her. He merely had her in the biblical sense. I like the first explanation a whole lot better. It makes a whole lot more sense in the terms of what we're looking at here. Now, I'll tell you, let's just read this a little bit and we'll think about this. Whatever the situation was, she was defiled. He seized her and lay with her, and she was defiled. But look what happens. His soul was drawn to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob. In other words, after he had done this thing, he fell in love with her. All right. This is not unheard of, even with people who physically grab a woman and force her to have intercourse, rape. Okay, that's not unheard of, and we have to understand also the mindset and the social context of the times. This was something that the Israelites were warned about with their own kings that were going to come up. That the kings were going to see women and they were going to simply take them. So this is kind of like a preview of what's going to happen in Kings and Chronicles. These kings are going to say, I want this woman and I'm going to take her. David did that. He saw her and he said, go get her, bring her to me. In this case, Shechem physically or irresistible force was used against Dinah. Okay, so let's just leave it at that. All right, whatever it was, she was defiled, and this is not her fault, and no blame should be laid at her feet. The problem, of course, is with Shechem. So what happens? His soul was drawn to Dinah. He loved the young woman and spoke tenderly to her. This is the instance that would lead us to believe that possibly this was not physical force, as in he grabbed her physically, but he merely used his social standing to kind of bring her in, maybe disarm her mentally, and then coerce her into doing the things that they did. All right. So in any case, here's Shechem. He wants her now. He falls in love with her. So he speaks to his father Hamor. He says, get me this girl for my wife. All right. So now the father had a responsibility here, but this is the issue of the times. This is the social issues of the time. Jacob hears that his daughter has been defiled, but his sons were with the livestock, so he says, I'm not going to say anything until they come and we can speak about this together. This is how things are resolved in that part of the world. So Hamor comes out to Jacob to speak with him. The sons of Jacob, his sons had come in from the field when they heard of it. The men were indignant and very angry, which is understandable. As a matter of fact, they show more concern over this than Jacob is shown to have concern. They were angry because he had done this outrageous thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, for such a thing must not be done. Well, absolutely. That shows that the concept of sexual sin and physical force, there were rules and laws in place by God even back then. Certain things you just don't do. If he had wanted her as a wife, he would have come and he would have spoken to Jacob the way that a man should do it, and they would have hammered all of that out, and Jacob could have said, no, I don't want her to marry you, uncircumcised heathen. That's not what's going to happen. And Shechem would have just had to simply take it and go back home, without a wife. But that's not he put the cart before the horse, so to speak, right? So Hamor comes, he begs Dinah's hand from Jacob. The sons are very angry. So Hamor speaks with him. He says, listen, the soul of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to him to be his wife. Make marriages with us. Give your daughters to us and take our daughters for yourself. You shall dwell with us, and the land shall be open to you. Dwell and trade in it, and get property in it. Now, this is very much a sort of a forewarning about what's going to happen. If everybody remembers, when God talks to the children of Israel before they come into the land of Canaan, he said, there's some things that you're not to do. There's some things you're not to do. Number one, you're supposed to kill all of the inhabitants. Slay them all. If I haven't driven them out before you get there, then you slay them. Do not marry their kid. Do not let your sons marry their daughters. Do not let your daughters marry their sons. Don't make allegiances with them. Don't make agreements with them. You don't engage in them in any way. And of course, the first thing they do is start out doing the right thing, and then they slowly lose steam and they don't do what God tells them to do, and it becomes a snare to them. We haven't seen that admonition from God yet, but we have seen the intention of the patriarchs that we're not going to get families for our sons and daughters from these people. We're going to go back home and get those. I don't know if Jacob kind of ruined that with Laban. Are they going to go back home and get another daughter or another son or whatever it may be? I don't know. It would be very difficult to go back over and do that kind of thing, especially with those heaps of stones there. But that would have been the better option. But look, let's continue on. It says, Shechem also said to her father and to her brother, so Shechem is with Hamor at this time. Let me find favor in your eyes, and whatever you say to me, I will give. Ask for me as great a bride price and as gift as you will. In other words, the sky's the limit. No matter what you want, I'm going to give it because I love your daughter and I want her to be my wife. Give me the young woman to be my wife. All right. So the sons of Jacob answer Shechem and his father deceitfully because he had defiled their sister Dinah. So what they're going to do is they're going to counter a wrong with a wrong. He says, we said to him, we cannot do this thing to give our daughter to one who is uncircumcised, for that would be a disgrace to us. Only on this condition will we agree with you, that you will become as we are by every male among you being circumcised. So what's happening here? They're using a sacred rite of a sign of a covenant with God as the pretext for a murder. All right? That's a despicable thing. That's just a horrible thing. That would be essentially like saying, hey, listen, we want you to worship the way that we worship. We want to see you in church on Sunday, and you get everybody in the church, and then you bar the doors and you set the place on fire. There's no difference between the two. Okay. So if you get circumcised, everybody in the town, not just you, everybody in the town has to be circumcised. Then he said, we will give you our daughters to you, and we will take your daughters to ourselves. We will dwell with you and become one people. Now, they have no intention of doing this. They have something in mind. But if you will not listen to us, we will take our daughter and we'll be gone. So their words pleased Hamor and Shechem. So they did not delay. I like this. I mean, this is a man who genuinely loves her. They came about this horribly. They put the cart before the horse. But he apparently genuinely loved this woman. So they went, why else would you do something like this? At however old they are, let's say they're 30 years old. And at the time they're using flint knives to go and circumcise you and everybody in town. And how much power did he have over all the men in town to say, hey, listen, that we're going to do this thing. And you have no choice. Everybody's got to do it. Every man's got to do it. This is a guy that really wanted Dinah for himself. So they go to the gate of the city. They speak to all the men in the town. They said, listen, they're at peace with us. Let them dwell in the land and trade in it. Look, and they have something in mind too. They know that if this man Jacob, with all of the stuff that he's got, all of their sons, all the sons that he has, all of their daughters, there's going to be intermarrying, and pretty soon Shechem says this is going to be a town to be reckoned with because we're going to kind of incorporate them into us. We'll be intermarried with one another. We'll have a responsibility towards one another. Look at all the flocks and the herds. Pretty soon this is going to be a bustling metropolis because we're going to be brought together in a way that can't be easily separated by marriages. Okay, so they're at peace with us. The land is large enough. Let them take their daughters as wives. We will give them our daughters only on this condition, though. This is what they've said to us. This is what we have to do. We'll let every male among us is circumcised as they are circumcised. Will not all their livestock and their property and their beasts be ours? Only let us agree with them, and they will dwell with us. So both of these groups of people have something in mind. One of them, I want the wife, or I want this daughter as my wife. This is what we have to do. And then they'll be part of us, and they can't be easily separated. The sons of Jacob, however, want them to be circumcised because they have something else in mind. All right, so what do? They go and they do that, and they went out, and every male was circumcised. All who went out of the gate of his city, in other words, everyone who lived in the city was under his rule, went and was circumcised. On the third day, when they were sore, completely understandable, two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords and came against the city while it felt secure and killed all the males. They killed Hamor, they killed Shechem, they took Dinah out of Shechem's house and went away. Then the sons of Jacob came upon the slain and plundered the city. So two boys went in there when they were sore. It's going to be hard to swing a sword. You're not going to be able to defend yourself. They got them when they were sore after being circumcised. They go, the rest of them come, they plunder the city, they took their flocks and their herds, their donkeys, whatever was in the city and in the field, all their wealth, all their little ones and their wives, all that was in the houses they captured and plundered. Again, they countered a wrong with a wrong. And no matter what they had done no matter what Shechem had done to Dinah, the men of the city had not done that thing. They were not responsible for that. Only Shechem was. And what did they do? They killed all of the men. So they destroyed an entire town. Now, granted, it was a wicked Canaanite city. No doubt they were engaged in all manner of things, but God had not told them to do this thing. They had no right to do this thing. So they did something that was very, very wrong. And look at verse 30. Jacob says to Simeon and Levi, he doesn't berate them for, why have you taken these innocent men's blood? He doesn't look at it that way. I think he's looking at this all the wrong way. He says, you have brought trouble on me. Now, what have you done? You've killed all these innocent men. Look at all these innocent women and children and all of this. You had no right to do this. He says, you brought trouble on me by making me stink to the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites and the Perizzites. My numbers are few, and if they gather themselves against me and attack me, I shall be destroyed, both I and my household. And then they answer him, but he treated our sister like a common prostitute. He had it coming. Both of them are wrong. The men of Shechem were wrong. Everybody was wrong. The only innocent person I see in this entire thing was Dinah, and I felt bad for her because she did not deserve what happened to her. So not only was revenge against the men on their minds, but it was also the idea of taking. They're kind of bypassing, because a lot of this stuff would come to them after Jacob was gone, after Jacob dies. But now they've got stuff for themselves from this plundered city. All right, I'm gonna stop it for just a second, and then we'll come right back, okay? Okay, well, apparently my phone went into screensaver, so this will be 2 videos. Apologize for that, but that's okay. All right, so let's go to chapter 35. We finished up with chapter 34. I wish I could say, has anybody got any questions? And if you do, as I said before, go ahead and email those to me. But again, that's one of those stories that we learn from, and it goes to show that the sons of Jacob, sons of Israel, were not always the best boys. There's a lot of issues that go along with these guys. Part of it is a jealousy, petty jealousy between them. You're living in a very fractured household. I hope that Jacob was a better example from them. It certainly doesn't appear that he agreed to anything they were doing, but you look at his, like as we said, his response was not, why have you killed these people? It's, what have you done to me? Which is a sad state of affairs if that's his first thought. All right, so let's go to chapter 35. God says to Jacob, arise, go to Bethel and dwell there. Bethel meaning house of God. Make an altar there to the God who appeared to you. So he gives him some marching orders, right? He's in Shechem, so he needs to get away from Shechem. There's going to be problems, right? You're going to have the families of all of these people who live in other places. They're going to be coming, trying to find out what's going on. You need to get out of there and move. So he does. He goes to Bethel, makes an altar, and so that he can worship and he can offer sacrifices, not only for himself, but for his family. Let's see. Look what he says in verse 2. He says to his household and all who are with him, put away the foreign gods that are among you. Not that were, but are among you. This is kind of an interesting thing, and this goes back to what happened with Laban. Laban was a believer in Jehovah. There was an understanding on his part that Jehovah was God, but he also had the household, the foreign gods that were with him. And here's what's happening in this. This is, as he speaks to his household as well as all who were with him. So not only his servants, but his own family member, his wives, his concubines, and his children put away the foreign gods. So this I think tells us that living in Canaan had maybe become a problem for them. They were beginning to be drawn away to these foreign gods, even while they worshiped Jehovah. They were being drawn away to these foreign gods. So he says, I want you to put them away. This not only means quit following them, quit paying attention to them, quit giving any credence to them whatsoever, but also if you've acquired any of the little statues, the little I think most archaeologists or paleontologists call them fetishes. If you've got any of these little small gods representations, you need to get away from them as well. He says, purify yourself, change your garments. Let's go up to Bethel. And I'm going to make an altar. In verse 4, they gave to Jacob all the foreign gods they had. So that means they did have those with them. And the rings that were in their ears. And these were probably rings that symbolized some sort of an allegiance to a god as well. These weren't just simple earrings. These were piercings that were there for a particular religious purpose. And Jacob hides them under the terebinth tree that was near Shechem. All right, so he buries them, which is a good idea. When we get rid of the false gods in our life, we bury them, never to be seen again. All right. So as they journeyed, a terror from God fell upon the cities. They did not pursue them. This would have certainly been the case with what happened with Shechem. God's protecting them because of what they'd done. And they did not. The people did not pursue or arrest them because of a fear from God. We're not given to know what this means. It could be that God spoke to them and told them to do this. It could mean that God showed some sort of a sign or wonder. I wonder if while they were traveling, something happened in the sky over them that showed that they were either under the protection of a God or God was angry with them, so the people didn't want to be anywhere near them. Not real sure. But it says a terror from God fell upon the cities. Jacob comes to Luz, that is Bethel. Remember, it used to be called Luz, and then they renamed it Bethel, which is in the land of Canaan. Everybody's there with him, and that's where they dwell. All right. Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, dies. She was buried there. Jacob appears to God. God appears to Jacob again, and he blesses him. And God said to him, "Your name is Jacob. No longer shall your name be called Jacob, but Israel shall be your name." So he called his name Israel. God said to him, "I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply." A nation and company of nations. So not only is the nations that you've got, but there are going to be other nations from these people shall come from you, and kings shall come from your own body. That's a powerful blessing for someone from that time, and that social understanding. The idea of having, while you may not be one, you're going to one of your descendants is going to be king, and not just one, but many of them. The land that I gave to Abraham and Isaac, I will give to you, and I will give the land to your offspring after you. So again, he gives him the seed and the land promise. And I always wondered, when I was a kid, I would hear people talk about the land promise. I understood that. I even understood the nation promise. The issue I had was with the seed promise. Why is it a seed promise? Well, because when the promise is given to the person, it is in the form of a seed. Now, what do you mean by that, Chuck? When you think about a seed, what do you think of? When somebody says, "Hey, take a look at this," and they open a little packet and they pour out a seed into your hand. You look at it and you go, "Oh, what's this going to be?" I say, "What's a tomato seed?" "Oh, okay." You look at it in your hand and you say, "But it's not a tomato." "No, it's not a tomato." "Well, when is it going to be a tomato?" "When the time is right. After it's been planted and watered and fertilized, and the ground has been tilled so that the ground receives the seed. It's going to come up in the time frame in which it's supposed to." I'm not a gardener, so I can't begin to tell you if you plant a tomato seed about how long it takes for that tomato to grow. I don't know. I've never been a gardener. My wife does it, but she's not here and I can't ask her. But you think about all the things that come from seeds. It's like, ooh, that's nice. What is that? Oh, that's a watermelon seed, but it's not a watermelon. I can't eat it, or I could. It's not going to do any good. It's not going to taste very good. There's nothing to it. but eventually in the process of time, in the fullness of time, it will develop into a plant that will produce watermelon. And not only that, one seed, if I plant it in the ground, it's not going to produce one tomato. It's going to produce a plant that's going to have many tomatoes. So when we think about that in that regard, the idea of a seed promise makes a little bit more sense. It's God showing them the very beginning of something, and with the understanding that something much, much greater than that is going to come further down the road. I mean, you look at the size of a watermelon, and how many seeds can it contain? Hundreds. You know, I don't get seeded watermelons. I like seedless. The seeded are, I think, taste better, but you have to spit out the seeds, and I don't really care to do that. But if you gather all the seeds in that watermelon, they'll certainly fill your hand. But that's just one watermelon produces all of those seeds, and one seed produces a whole lot of watermelons. So it's just God understands it. And by the way, well, I tell you what, let's move on, because I'm gonna get caught up in something, and there's no sense in doing that. All right. Then God went up from him in the place in verse 13 where he had spoken with him, and Jacob sets up a pillar in the place where he had spoken with him, a pillar of stone. He pours out a drink offering on it, poured oil on it. So Jacob called the name of the place where God had spoken with him Bethel. All right. So God has appeared to him again. He's reiterated the promises that he's going to bless him with. He anoints the place as Bethel. And that's just, basically verse 9 is is simply a repeat of what's happening earlier. Jacob is now Israel. All right, let's go. Verse 16, they journeyed from Bethel when they were still some distance from Ephrath. Rachel went into labor. By the way, here, at this point, they are still on their way to see Isaac and Rebekah. They're still on their way to see Isaac and Rebekah. When Rachel went into labor, so she was pregnant, as she had hard labor. When her labor was at its hardest, the midwife said to her, "Do not fear, you have another son." And as her soul was departing, for she was dying, she called his name Ben-Oni. Ben-Oni means son of my sorrow. In other words, this is a son I'm giving birth to, and I won't see grow up. I'll never see him grow into the young man that he's going to be. But his father called him Benjamin. Benjamin means son of the right hand. He probably renamed him because the idea of calling your son the name that represents his mother's death may not have been something that Jacob wanted to do, which is understandable. So they bury her on the way to Ephrath, which, look at what your scripture is probably in parentheses. It'll say that is Bethlehem. So she was buried on the way to Bethlehem. And Jacob sets up a pillar over her tomb, and it is there to this day. She is the only one of the major participants in the patriarchs that is not buried at Machpelah. Leah is buried there. Jacob is buried there. Abraham and Sarah are buried there. Isaac and Rebekah are buried there. But Rachel is not buried there. So it's interesting, she wanted so badly to be that part. And even now, she's buried separate from the rest of the family. While Israel lived in that land, this is kind of interesting as well. It's a one-verse thing, and it says it very specifically, but we'll see later on towards the end of Genesis why this was, what this does. While Israel lived in that land, Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard of it. So Reuben is trouble. They're trouble. This definitely comes back to haunt him a little bit further on, because Reuben was firstborn, so he would have been at the top of Jacob's blessing list. But as we see later on, Jacob removes that blessing of the firstborn, that birthright, from him, instead gives it to Joseph. All right. So he sleeps with Bilhah, his father's concubine, but it's also his brother's mother. And you think about how horrible that would be. That's an appalling insult to his father. And it says, hold on a second. Oh, sorry, I went back too far. And Israel heard of it. Now, the idea of Israel here is not Israel the nation, but Israel the man. So his father heard of it. Now, I think it's reasonable to assume, it's reasonable to suppose that Jacob was no longer having relations with the two handmaidens. It's possible that he was still having relations with Leah. I don't know. But of course, Rachel's gone, and now he is only left with Leah as his wife. The other two are not his wives; they are his concubines. But when he hears of this, this must have still been an insult, an appalling insult to him. And it does come back to haunt him. Okay. All right. So finally, in verse 27, Jacob comes to his father Isaac at Mamre, where Abraham and Isaac had sojourned. Remember the oaks at Mamre? This is where Isaac is. And the days of Isaac were 180 years, and he lived long enough to see his son Jacob come back from that long journey. And we understand that when they're sojourning, this is not something where they were there for a weekend or even 2 weeks or even 3 weeks. It could have been years that they live at one place or another, and then they move on. It's probably until the animals eat every bit of vegetation, and then they finally have to move on. And I wonder how much of that has to do with the desolation of much of Israel now, or all these flocks and herds they're eating, because sheep will eat down to the ground and then eat under the ground. They'll eat the blades of grass and then they'll eat the roots, and they can absolutely devastate a piece of property that has lush greenlands is now desolate because sheep get a hold of it. So, but anyway, days of Isaac were 180 years. Isaac breathes his last, and he dies and was gathered to his people, old and full of days. The idea of gathered to his people, meaning when he dies, his entire family gathers around, says goodbye to him, they mourn him, all of these things. And look at his sons, multiple, Esau and Jacob, bury him. So Esau comes from Seir from Edom to join forces with Jacob to bury their father. There would have been this big parade. They would have carried his body, carried his body all the way down to Machpelah and buried it in the family burial plot. All right. Nothing much here specifically special. The main thing is, of course, what we find in in verse 9 all the way through verse 15, where God appears to Jacob again and reiterates the promise that he had given to him before on his way out of the land and now on his way back into the land. All right. So he blessed him in Bethel, and then he leaves and he comes back and he blesses him again at Bethel. All right, chapter 36, there's really not a whole lot there. There's not a need to go through a lot of these. Not to say that they can't be important. We need to point out that every one of the people that are mentioned here are considered patriarchs by the Arab nations who claim Abraham as their father. Many of them, of course, are what we understand Islam, Muslims. They claim Abraham as a father, and they link themselves to Jehovah through Esau. They believe that Jacob's actions were treacherous, and Esau is the firstborn. He is the preeminent. He is the one that the blessings will come through, and that's why they link themselves to God, Jehovah, as they refer to him, Allah. They link themselves to Allah through Esau, not through Jacob. They are not, they're not part of the covenant. But if you ever go through all of these, it's very interesting to see all these people. If you go through the writings of the Arab people, you'll find many of these people listed, and they're listed in high regard. They're considered patriarchs and are certainly well thought of. But they are not part of the covenant. They are not in that part of this. Okay. So let's go on to chapter 37. This is the last major portion of the scripture of Genesis 37 through, there'll be one chapter where it's not, but the rest of this is the story of Joseph. So Jacob lives in the land of his father's sojournings in the land of Canaan. These are the generations. Now, before we get into this, let's look at this. Joseph and his brethren. Joseph could be considered a type of Christ. There are many similarities in the story. Just look at a couple of these. The brothers of Joseph were envious and they hated him. Jesus was hated even by his own brethren in Matthew 27, verse 18. The idea of brethren here is, of course, his fellow Jews. It's not his brothers and sisters, it's his fellow Jews. It says, for envy they delivered him. All right. Both Joseph and Jesus were sold for silver. The efforts of Joseph's brothers to destroy him actually elevated him, and the efforts of Satan to destroy Christ made him the savior of the world, right? That was Satan's responsibility for killing him. God wanted it to happen. It needed to happen, but Satan was the one that caused it to happen through his workings in man. Joseph, and this is an interesting one. Joseph, in a sense, finds himself between two criminals, the butler and the baker. And that's absolutely true. They were criminals. One was pardoned, one was not, but they were two criminals, two convicted criminals. Christ, of course, was crucified between two thieves. One of those characters, one of those criminals, was forgiven and elevated, right? The butler went back to Pharaoh. The cupbearer went back to Pharaoh. The baker was hanged. The two thieves, one was with Jesus, one was forgiven, the other one was not. One asked to remember me when you come into your kingdom, and the other one rebuked him and blasphemed against him. Joseph was sent on a mission to the brethren. Jesus was sent from the Father with a mission to Israel. Joseph begged the chief butler to remember him when he was restored to his honor, and the forgiven thief requested that Jesus would remember him when he came into his kingdom. Joseph saved the whole Jewish nation from the famine and death by bringing them into Goshen, and Jesus, of course, saves the new Israel by bringing them into his kingdom. This is just some of those interesting little tidbits that if you don't look at it real carefully. I know the story of Joseph is a fascinating one. It's a great story, but I think sometimes we read through it too quickly. We like the story aspect of it, and the story aspect of it is great. And I think we get the big picture, but sometimes it's the little things that kind of mean a whole lot. And if we're not careful, we can certainly let those slide, and we don't get the full impact of everything that we need to get. All right, so he's 17 years old. So he's a youth. He's pasturing the flock with his brethren. He brings a bad report of them to his father. So right off the bat, Joseph's not making any friends. Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons. This is a fault on behalf of Jacob or Israel, the fact that he loved Joseph more than any of his other sons. And look at why. Not because Joseph was necessarily a better person, but because he was the son of his old age. In other words, he was an old man at this point, and he sees this young man with all of the promise that comes along with it, and he's seen the sinful behavior of his other sons. So he's thinking, maybe this is the one. This is my bright and shining star. Plus, he's the son of Rachel, which was the wife, of course, that he really loved more than Leah. So he made him this robe of many colors. A lot is made of this. It's just simply a gift. It's something to show favoritism, and that's a bad idea on Israel's part. But he does it. It just goes to show the people of God are not perfect. His brothers saw that their father loved him more than all of his other brothers. They hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. So he has this dream. Look at these dreams. We have, he tells it to his brothers, and they hated him even more for it. He says, "Hear this dream that I have dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright. Behold, your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to my sheaf." His brothers said, "Are you indeed to reign over us? Are you indeed to rule over us?" And they hated him even more for his dreams and his words. So I think this is interesting. Oh, let's look at the next one. "Behold, I've dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told it to his father and his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come down to bow ourselves to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in mind. Remember, his father's had a dream, and that dream absolutely came true. So it's possible that I think it's probable that Jacob's thinking, well, is God speaking to this young man? He spoke to me. I may not like the dream, and it may not make Joseph a very nice person in the present time, but is there something to this? Well, and we have to think about this. Joseph is 17 years old. You show me a 17-year-old that knows exactly what to say to aggravate someone. If you've had kids, you've had older kids, they know if what they're saying is arrogant. They know if what they're saying is rude. They're old enough to know that. And I genuinely believe that Joseph was old enough to know the effect that these words were going to have on his brothers and his father. I have a couple of questions. Did he take Jacob's preference for him as sort of an excuse for his behavior? Well, Dad loves me more than you anyway, and these dreams make perfect sense in that regard. Joseph is not being a good, godly person at this point. I know the tendency is to we read this and say, Joseph was like, I don't understand what these dreams mean, but mine stood upright and yours bowed down. I think Joseph knew, and it's possible they even said it like that. Mine was standing upright and yours came and bowed down to mine. And these brothers are like, oh, if I could get a hold of him, I'd wear him out. Can't touch him. Dad'd be mad. Dad'd be mad. Dad'd be mad. Can't do anything. So I wrote here, God uses Jacob's partiality towards Joseph, Joseph's immature, arrogant behavior, and his brothers, plural brothers, jealousy to bring about his will. I don't think this is what God had in mind. That's not what he wanted, but he's going to use it. As we've seen all throughout the narrative, God uses his people to bring about his will. And it doesn't matter what our behavior is, God's will is not going to be denied. All right. So let's look a little further. Let's go a little bit further. His brothers went to pasture, and Israel says, hey, I want you to go out and see, give me a report about your brothers. Go see it as well. Bring me word. So he sends them there, and a man finds him. He says, what are you looking for? I'm looking for my brothers. He says, they've gone away, for I heard them say, let's go to Dothan. So he went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. Now, why did they go to Dothan when his brothers were supposed to be shepherding pasturing the flock at Shechem? Was this a disobedience of Dad? Entirely probable, knowing what we know about them. They've said, hey, this is boring. Let's move on. Could be that Dothan maybe was a little bit, maybe a larger town. Maybe there's something to do in Dothan, so they could pasture the flock and then maybe go into town for whatever. I don't know, but they've left where they were. So at this point, when he walks away, nobody knows where these brothers are. Jacob doesn't know. He thinks they're at Shechem. And they are on their own, left to their own devices, and we see what happens. They see him from afar, and before he came near to them, so they're sitting there with the sheep or doing whatever, and they see him coming, and they start to conspire, and they plan, and they conspire to kill him. So their first thought is to kill Joseph. That's what they think of. Here he comes. Here comes that dreamer, so to speak. Let's kill him. This is our chance. Dad's never going to know what happened. We're not even where he thinks we are. We can kill him. We can make it look like an accident, and we will be rid of him. He won't come to us with any more dreams thinking he's better than we are. Sounds perfectly plausible, right? Let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits, and then we'll say that an animal killed him, and then you'll see if he dreams anymore after this. So they've decided what they're going to do. Now, all 11 of the brothers, or 10 brothers at this point. I have 11, sorry. All 10 of the brothers are There are 12 brothers. Benjamin is not likely with them because Benjamin's actually younger than Joseph. So Benjamin's at home. He sends Joseph. So you got 10 brothers that are out in the field. The 11th one in Joseph comes to see what's going on. And they plan on killing him. But Reuben's plan is to later come and release him and get him back to his father. Is Reuben here trying to redeem his actions with Bilhah? It says that Israel found out about it. He likely confronted him on it. We don't know what Reuben's answer to this was, but this could be a way of, well, maybe I'll get back on Dad's good side by bringing back his son. Listen, we don't know what was going on, but here's your son back. All right. So Reuben says, let's not take his life. He says, shed no blood. Throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him. The pit was probably a dry well, a cistern that during the dry months didn't have anything in it. She said, so that he might rescue him out of their hand to restore him to his father. So when Joseph comes to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors, the object that just stood out, because he wore it all the time to show how much he was loved by his father. Doing that thing that young people do so well, just getting on your nerves. They took him and threw him into a pit, and then they sat down to eat. So Now they've got another way of going about this. Let's not kill him. Don't kill him. Just throw him into the pit. Just throw him into the pit. I don't know what they thought they were going to do with him. They decided not to kill him. Reuben talked him out of killing him. Just throw him in the pit. Maybe they'll terrorize him for a little bit, scare him, maybe force him never to tell him one of the dreams again. Don't know what is going on. But when Reuben, who's gone away for whatever reason, Reuben returns to the pit and sees that Joseph's not in the pit, what happened? Well, in verse 25, they sat down to eat. They saw a caravan of Ishmaelites, and they said, Judah says, what profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Let's sell him. And, look what he says, for he is our brother, our own flesh. So we won't kill him, but we'll sell him into slavery. Granted, you're not killing him. He's not going to die. But the thing that you've done, and it's interesting that God makes an absolutely steadfast rule in Levitical law that you are not to sell your brother. You can't. He can sell himself, but you cannot sell your brother into the hands, especially into the hands of a foreigner. So all of these, you look at all these laws that God creates and you think, where did that come from? Well, this is probably where this came from. All right. So they sell him and they took him up out of the pit. They got 20 shekels of silver. Now Joseph is with him, and you can imagine they've tied his hands. He's probably walking behind the car, and he's probably looked behind him. Now his kid's 17 years old. He's young. They don't care. That's not their concern. So the thing they see is they see Joseph being carried away by that caravan with his arms crossed, tied up, and he's walking behind that caravan. And to them, hey, we didn't kill him. He's gone. He's out of our hair. We don't have to worry about it ever again. We don't ever have to hear any of his dreams again. And we didn't shed any blood. And they probably, man, we did a great thing. And they're congratulating each other. Look at what happens in verse 29. Reuben comes back to the pit. Joseph's not in the pit. He tears his clothes and he goes to his brother. He says, the boy's gone. And where shall I go? So we can look at this a couple of different ways. Is he concerned about Joseph? I think he is to a certain extent. But look at what he says. Where shall I go? Why? Well, because he has, as the oldest brother, he has responsibility for Joseph. It's on him. If something happened to Joseph, if he had been killed, it was on Joseph's blood would be on his hands. Right or wrong, he's responsible for him. So he's very, very, very concerned about his own fate. I like this. What was Joseph's words a little bit later on? He says, you meant it for evil. And they did. They meant it for evil. You don't sell somebody into slavery meaning it for good. It's not like they say, hey, maybe you'll go to Egypt and make this great plan and save a bunch of people. No, they wanted him out of their hair, and they didn't want to kill him, so they were going to sell him into slavery, and they did. They certainly meant it for evil. All right. Let's see. So they sent the robe of many colors, or they're trying to figure out. They can't tell their dad that they sold him into slavery, and they didn't kill him, so they don't have to worry about that. But they have to present some sort of story to Jacob. So they slaughtered a goat, dipped the robe in the blood, and they sent the robe of many colors and brought it to their father and said, "We have found this. Please tell us whether it's your son's robe or not." And of course they knew that. I'm not sure why this questioning by them towards Jacob was even necessary. So they could have simply said, look, we found Joseph's robe, but they make Jacob essentially identify the remains of his son. Kind of a petty little thing to do. And he identified and said, it is my son's robe. A fierce animal has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces. A very reasonable supposition here. Jacob tears his garments, with sackcloth on his loins, and mourned for his son many days. Question, I guess, would he have mourned as deeply for any of the other brothers? I don't know. I think it's the fact that Joseph was his youngest. He was the son of Rachel. The only other one he has is Benjamin, and we see he's very protective of Benjamin after this. It could be that Jacob is kind of done with his other sons. While I know he saw them as sons, there was always that little thing that separated them from the rest. Okay, but would he have mourned as deeply for them? I don't know. I think he would have mourned, but maybe not as deeply. But he would not be comforted. They all rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And this is an interesting glimpse right here into the understanding of an afterlife, belief in an afterlife. We don't read about that a whole lot, even throughout the Old Testament. We don't read too much about their understanding about what the afterlife was. But it says, I will go down into Sheol to him. Not into Sheol, not just simply into death, but they believed in this realm of the dead. Joseph was dead. Now he lived in another realm outside of this one. And in order for Jacob to ever see him again, he himself would have to die to go to this place to see him. That's why I think that the idea of resurrection, the idea of a resurrection that we find a little bit later on, even the one that Abraham understood, there was an afterlife. They believed in it. Jacob knew that he was going to see his son again, but not sure in what capacity Jacob understood this idea of an afterlife. We are going to see our family members again. Some believe that we won't know them. I believe that we will. I think that's what's going to make heaven even more fantastic. But anyway, it just gives us kind of a brief glimpse. Jacob knew, and he probably at this point, if it weren't for Benjamin, he'd just be ready to go. He'd be ready to die. Rachel's gone. His other sons are not turning out quite the way he hoped they would. Joseph is dead. So what does he really have left? All he has is Benjamin. And that might be the only reason he's really hanging on. And I think it shows that's why the reunion of Jacob and Joseph is so fantastic towards the end of Genesis. All right. So now we read here at verse 36, the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard. And I think this is, let's see. Let me see just a second. I want to see where I am. I don't want to go too long. Okay. We've got a few minutes. Chapter 38. This is another one of those little small one chapter story narratives that go along. This one is if you don't sit down and chart it out, it can be very difficult to follow along with. You're not real sure what the problem is here. Is there sin going on? Is there wickedness going on? Is this righteous? What kind of behavior is this? What exactly happens? I'm gonna lay this out for you. It's a convoluted story. All right. So I'm gonna lay it out very simply. Judah, one of Jacob's sons, Jacob's son, marries a woman of Canaan. He has 3 sons with her. The first son, dies due to his wickedness. It says that God kills him. Don't know what it was, but God kills him because of his wickedness. His widow, Tamar, has the right to bear children. All right. Now that her husband is gone, there's only 2 other ways that this can happen. All right. Has 2 brothers. All right. His brothers are Onan and Shelah. All right. So Tamar is married to He dies. So she has the right to bear children, and the only places she can get those from is from Onan, and she can get them from Shelah. Shelah is too young to do this. Apparently he is a youth. He's not old enough to engage in that kind of behavior. So the only person that she can bear children from, a levirate marriage is what it's called. The idea of raising up sons for your brother, you know, the obligation was for the surviving brothers to give children to your brother's widow. Okay, that's what a levirate marriage is. All right. So what happens? Judah says, okay, you have a responsibility, Onan. This is what you're going to do. You're going to go in. You're going to go and impregnate Tamar so that she can have children. That's her right. So what does Onan do? Onan does not want to give Tamar children. Why? Why is that? Because they won't be his children. All right. It's a wicked thought process. She has the right to them. This was your brother. You need to go do this. Onan doesn't want to do this. Plus, any inheritance that would have come to is now going to come to him. All right, because he's going to be the firstborn. He's going to get that extra share. So there's 2 reasons that he doesn't want to do this. So he figures out this plan. What he's going to do is he's going to go into her. He's going to have sexual intercourse with her. But rather than impregnating her, he is going to let his semen spill on the ground. Not to be done. That's not what you're supposed to do. You have an obligation. God, of course, sees this, and destroys him because of his bad behavior. Said you had a responsibility, you didn't do it, you acted, and the worst thing is you deceived, you acted like you were going to do it, you didn't do it. So Onan is a wicked man. Was wicked, he died. Onan was wicked, he died. So the only son left, the only brother left is Shelah. All right, Shelah's too young. So what does Judah do? He says to Tamar, he says, go back and live with your father as a widow. When this last brother, my youngest son gets old enough, Shelah gets old enough, I will let you have children through him. And she said, I'll abide by that. So she goes back to her father's house, and she remains there, childless and a widow. That is not a good situation for a woman in that particular point in time. Okay, she can't marry again unless she's given permission by her father and her father-in-law, because that was his son that she married. So she's stuck. All right, there's nothing really she can do. So she sits and she waits and she waits, and it doesn't say how long, but she waits and waits and waits. All right, in this waiting, Shelah grows old enough to go in to perform his duty as Er's brother, to go into her and help her have children. But Judah doesn't allow it. He doesn't send her in there. He's scared. And it says here, till Shelah my son grows up, in verse 11, for he feared that he would die like his brothers. So Tamar went in and remained in her father's house. So Shelah gets old enough, Judah doesn't allow it, and the years go by. All right. So then what happens? All right. In the course of time, Judah's wife dies. All right. He goes into a period of mourning, and then he goes up to his sheep shearers. And Tamar finds out that Judah is on his way. Now remember, her husband's dead. Her husband's brother won't give her children. And Shelah's old enough, but Judah won't let him. So she said, I'm going to live in my father's house a widow forever for no reason. It is my right to have children if it's possible. So what does she do? She disguises herself as a prostitute, and she sits on the side of the road where Judah would be coming up the road. Judah comes up the road, and she entices him. He gives in. They both go into the tent, and they have intercourse, and he goes on his way. He said, now, he thinks she's a prostitute. He says, what am I going to pay you? And she said, he said, I'll give you a goat, as payment for the sex. And she said, well, where's the goat? He said, well, I don't have it with me. But he said, what shall I give you? What kind of, I'm trying to think of the right word, token will I give you, right? What am I going to give you? It says here, a pledge. We can call it a pledge. What pledge will I give you to ensure that I come back and give you this goat? I'll give you something in exchange, and then when I come back and give you the goat, I'll take it back. And she says, your signet cord, in verse 18, your signet and your cord and your staff. So he gives all three of these things to her, and then he goes off on his way. And she is conceived, a baby boy, or two children are conceived, all right? She arose and went her way, taking off her veil, she puts on the garments of her widowhood. So she had these widow's garments, she took them off, disguised herself as a prostitute. Now she takes off her prostitute garb, puts back on her regular robes. All right. So Judah says, I've got to send this woman a goat. I promised her I'd pay. That's how I would pay her, is with a goat. So he sends this goat, and they go to find her, and they can't find her. And he's thinking, oh man, okay. And he's thinking to himself, oh, my signet ring, my cord, and my staff. She has them, and they can't find her. She's like, I tell you what, let's do. Let's just let it go. I'll let it slide. She can keep them. It's worth more than the goat. If I go around trying to find this woman, I'm going to be humiliated. So I'm not even going to worry about it. We'll just let it go. Well, let's look a little bit further on in verse 24. About 3 months later, Judah was told, Tamar, your daughter-in-law, the one that he slept with, has been immoral. Moreover, she is pregnant by immorality. Now remember, Judah doesn't know who she is. He just thinks she's a prostitute. Judah said, bring her out and let her be burned. And as she was being brought out, she sent word to her father-in-law, by the man to whom these belong, I am pregnant. She said, please identify who these are, the signet and the cord and the staff. And Judah said, oh, it was me. He went into his daughter-in-law and made her pregnant. Why? It didn't have to happen. Shelah could have gone in and done that, but he wouldn't let her. Judah wouldn't let him. I know it sounds like I'm stammering, I'm stumbling. I'm hoping you understand the story. All right. So Judah had the chance to make things right. He didn't. And now he's the one that's responsible for perpetuating his son's bloodline. All right. And by the way, would be his bloodline. Okay. So Judah identified them and said, she is more righteous than us, and said, I did not give her to my son Shelah, and he did not know her again. All right. He admits his wrong. He said, she's a better person than I am. I had a responsibility, and I blew it. So when the time of her labor came, there were twins in her womb, and when she was in labor, one put out a hand, and the midwife took and tied a scarlet letter. Did I say that? I'm sorry. Scarlet thread on his hand, saying this one came out first, identifying the firstborn. But as he drew back his hand, behold, his brother came out, and she said, what a breach you have made for yourself. Therefore his name was called Perez. Now Perez, we know that Perez is Tamar and Perez are in the lineage of Jesus Christ. We find that in the book of Matthew. And afterwards, his brother came out with a scarlet thread. He was supposed to be born first, but Perez like, nope, I'm first. And his name was called Zerah. All right. So let's finish up with chapter 39. Joseph was brought down to Egypt. Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had bought him from the Ishmaelites. Potiphar is the captain of Pharaoh's guard. Pharaoh, remember, is a title, not a name. Potiphar actually comes from a word eunuch. So it's possible that Potiphar was not his given name. It's simply a designation of who he was. Don't know. We're just going to take it as a proper name. It doesn't hurt anything for it to be that way. But Potiphar's name comes from the word eunuch. And this word can mean two different things. It could mean official, which he certainly was as a captain of the guard. And it also can mean a castrated male. Now, it's interesting because in those days, if a man was to aspire to certain positions in households, if he were maybe from another country, here we see that Potiphar was an Egyptian, but it was quite often required because of the worry of infidelity, improper behavior, impropriety, whatever it may be, that for a man to take that position, he would have to be castrated. So the word Potiphar here could mean a couple of different things. It certainly means, we certainly understand that he was an official, but it could mean that Potiphar was an official because he made the choice to be castrated in order to receive that office. Now, with that in mind, does that possibly explain Mrs. Potiphar's behavior? Maybe so. She's married to a man that cannot or will not engage in sexual relations because he can't. She can't receive children from him. And she has no choice but to be, she could have been given in marriage to him, and she had no choice in the matter. And she could be simply behaving in response to physical urges that every human being has. It does not change the fact of what she does and the behavior that she engages in a little bit later on. But it certainly would explain why she kept grabbing hold of Joseph and asking him to sleep with her. All right. So that's just a little bit of an explanation for some things. So he was a successful man because why? Remember this: he was successful because the Lord was with him. Not because of any innate behavior or any innate abilities that he had, but God was with him. Did God give him maybe knowledge? Yes. Did God give him ability? Maybe yes. Did God give him wisdom? Certainly God gave him the ability to understand dreams. He certainly was able to do that, but he was successful because God was with him. All right? And not only that, but the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. So not only in his own life, but in his master's house. And not only in Potiphar's house, but after he is in prison, in the keeper of the prisoners, he is given a position of authority and responsibility because everything that he does works. And these people don't have to worry about anything. Joseph's going to take care of it, right? So Joseph finds favor in Potiphar's sight and attends him, and Potiphar makes him the overseer of his house and puts him in charge of all that he had. All that he had. From that time, he made him overseer in his house over all that he had. The Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in house and field. so that he left all that he had in Joseph's charge. And because of him, he had no concern about anything but the food he ate. And that's just simply a flip way of saying the dude didn't have to worry about anything. All he had to do was walk in, sit at the table, the food sitting in front of him. He didn't have to worry about, did this get taken care of? Did this get done? What about this? What about this? Joseph's got it. I mean, this guy's living a charmed life, all because he bought this Hebrew slave. And he puts him in charge. He sees the ability and he says, look, you can do this well. Can you do this? Yep, I can do that well too. So pretty soon, before too long, Joseph, basically you have Potiphar, and to the side adjacent, you have Potiphar's wife. Okay? Then you have below Potiphar, you have Joseph. And then you have all of these other servants and all these other people. And Joseph's just making everything work the way that it's supposed to work. Joseph is handsome, good-looking guy. And after a time, his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, lie with me. And that means exactly what we think it means. She wants to sleep with him. She sees he's a good-looking guy. Maybe he's different. He looks a little different than the Egyptians that she sees all the time. It could be an ethnic thing. You know, some people have they're just drawn to whatever. I had a friend, and he liked Asian girls. And it was just simply they were more attractive to him than Caucasian or black or whoever else, European, whatever. That was what he saw. That's what he liked. He ended up marrying a sweet girl from Vietnam. But here he is, and she's probably seen this young guy, very exotic to her. Now we would think an Egyptian would be exotic. To her, this Hebrew is exotic. She's looking at him and think he's a good-looking guy. And if her husband is it's a possibility he's a castrated man, so he's not having sexual relations with her, and she has the urges of every other human being. So here it is. But in verse 8 he says, but he refused and said to his master's wife, behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house. He's put everything he has in my charge. He's not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept anything back from me except you, because you're his wife. And I like that this shows Joseph's heart as he's getting older. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? He would not do it. All right. So one day he goes into the house to do his work. None of the men are in the house. This tells us something, guys. Always protect yourself. Never be alone with a woman. Doesn't matter if she's the best person in the world. Don't be alone. Because if she's innocent and you're innocent, it doesn't mean that somebody might see it and say something that's not innocent. If she's a not innocent person, then you could easily have happen what happens here. And plus, women don't need to be alone with a man that's not their husband. It's dangerous. And Joseph finds out how this is. She catches him by his garment and says, lie with me again. But he left his garment in her hand and he fled and got out of the house. You know, it says flee from sin, flee from temptation. That's exactly what Joseph did. And while it was meant to be, it eventually was meant to be a good thing at the time, it wasn't so good. I mean, he's thinking, okay, I'm just going to get away from this. But look what happens. She calls out to the men of her household. They're none in the house. So she calls out to them. They come back in. She said, see, he has brought among us a Hebrew to laugh at us. Now, she had no problem with this Hebrew about 15, 20 minutes ago. He's brought this Hebrew to laugh at us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And as soon as he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried out, he left his garment and fled and got out of the house. She hold on to this coat, cloak, robe, whatever it may be, and she holds on to it. And when Potiphar comes home, she says, this Hebrew servant came in to me to laugh at me. It's interesting. She told them he came in to lie with me. She's telling Potiphar that he came in to laugh at me. But as soon as I lifted up my voice and cried, he left his garment beside me and fled out of the house. That's kind of interesting. Why did he say to them that he came with me to lie with me? And she told Potiphar that she came to laugh at me. Something to think about. So, verse 20, Joseph's master takes him and puts him in the prison where the prisoners were confined, and he was there in prison. The keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. Keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. So Joseph keeps progressing upward. First he's in Potiphar's house, then he's in prison, which was likely in Potiphar's house. Potiphar was the keeper of the guard. He was probably in a prison that was attached to Potiphar's house. You know, you think about how many times has Potiphar's wife done this in the past? Take some poor servant and then use him like that, and then accuse him of something and have him killed or put into prison. Did Potiphar know what his wife was like? Not if she's clever enough. Not if she's clever enough. He may have had a blind spot. He may have felt bad because, you know, she is married to him, possibly married to a man that can't give her what most men can. I don't know. There's just several different things going on here. But God shows him the same favor in prison, and Joseph, of course, is soon in charge of the prisoners. And they, you know, it's possible. I didn't think about it before then. It's possible that they were receiving better treatment with Joseph than they were with the original keeper of the guard. You know, Joseph saying, "Hey, I know what it's like to be falsely imprisoned. I know what it's like to be where you are," and maybe he's treating them with more kindness, and that made things run better. I don't know. But that's all I got, folks. I know it's probably been over the time frame, but this gets us caught up, and we have 4 more classes after this one. This is our 10th class, so we have 4 more to go, and we've got 10 chapters to go. So I think we're in good shape to finish up right when we need to. So thank you so much for your attention, and we will see you guys next week. Okay, bye-bye.